Mr. Sergeant at Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Hicks of Washington will serve as the chaplain of the day. Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are all aware of folks like Paul, Peter, and Jesus because they are mentioned quite often throughout the Bible. But if you're like me, you always like about reading about people that are not mentioned quite as often. Well, in Judges 3:31, we can find one of those people. It reads, "After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel." One man, one verse, 10 seconds for you to read about him, and a lifetime of change if you grasp his important lessons. Pronounce his name slowly, Shamgar. You can almost hear the growl at the end. There is power in that name. Shamgar had power. But Shamgar wasn't a military man, nor was he a politician. Shamgar was most likely an ordinary farmer trying to provide for his family when the enemy, the Philistines, terrorized the nation of Israel. Shamgar didn't wait to become great to do something great. Shamgar saved the entire nation of Israel as a farmer. Members, I know as much as anybody that life may not be what we always want it to be. I understand life has challenges. But the first lesson in becoming a man of influence and impact is to stop making excuses. If you are a farmer and that's all you know how to do, then ask God how he wants you to use your farming to influence and impact the realm you live in now. Don't wait to become a big shot, to do big shot things for our state and, more importantly, for our Lord. Let's pray. Dear gracious and heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day, and we pray that you'll be with us as we conduct the business of the great state of Tennessee. Lord, we pray that you'll help us to be fearless leaders like Shamgar. Lord, we have a special prayer for those that cannot be with us today. Pray for their families and just pray for healing for part. Lord, just pray for comfort and just pray that you'll really, really be with those folks today. Lord, forgive us where we fail you. And thank you most of all for sending your son to die on the cross for our sins. And thank you so much that he rose on the third day. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Representative Hicks will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 90 members present.
Let the journal reflect that Reps Byrd, Carter, Ogles, and Rudd are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcoming and honoring anyone seeking recognition. Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the Sergeant at Arms escort our guest into the chamber, please.
Mr. Sergeant at Arms, escort the guest into the well. Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I request that the clerk read the resolution.
Mr. Clerk, read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 178 by Representative Cochran and others, a resolution to honor the legendary Celeste Thomas on the occasion of her retirement. Whereas few employees have navigated the General Assembly long enough to work under 8 governors and 8 speakers of the House, yet somehow Celeste Thomas has survived and even excelled as a legislative staffer for some 48 years. And whereas Celeste first entered these hallowed halls in January 1973 when Ned McWhorter was serving his first term as Speaker of the House and leisure suits were all the rage in fashion. And whereas in the course of her illustrious career with the House of Representatives, Celeste has worked under 8 governors and 8 speakers. Add 3 to that total, and you have the number of members she has served, 19. And whereas after nearly 40 years wandering in the desert, Celeste Thomas got her just desserts when she was named House Employee of the Year in 2014. And whereas throughout her legislative career, Celeste Thomas has displayed a subtle sense of humor, through which she expresses her genuine admiration and respect for House members and their legislation. And whereas on March 12, 2021, Celeste Thomas will take her final curtain call and exit stage right to life beyond the General Assembly before she leaves the building for the last time, we wish to bid her fond farewell and thank her for brightening our lives for so many years. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we honor the legendary Celeste Thomas on the occasion of her departure from the General Assembly.
Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, if you will remember, about a month ago, we had a reception for Celeste Thomas over in Cordell Hall. We were able to recognize her from the gallery that day, but due to COVID protocols, we weren't able to do this on the floor. But really, I think it kind of worked out because we were able to bring her back and celebrate her here today. And honestly, it's kind of appropriate because, you know, Nashville legends, they don't just really slip away into retirement. They have farewell tours. And so I think it's appropriate that Celeste Thomas have a farewell tour. If anyone is deserving of that, she certainly is. You heard the clerk name a number of members that she worked for and former members. We were very fortunate to have several of them with us this morning. Former Representative Philip Johnson and his wife, Allison, I believe, are over here in this corner. We have former Representative Bobby Wood.
Yeah.
Former Representative Kevin Brooks. And with the Speaker's indulgence, I'm going to allow these gentlemen to speak if he's okay with that. And before I do that, Representative Johnson was not able to join us on the floor, but I did want to read, he wanted to share some remarks. And so Philip Johnson, his 78th district from 2002 to 2012, and Celeste took care of him the way she took care of the rest of us. And so Philip says, when I was elected, I started receiving mail addressed to the Honorable Philip Johnson. My wife, Allison, would laugh and say, they obviously do not know you very well. Celeste taught me that getting elected is not what makes you honorable, but it is a title that should be earned by treating others every day with honesty, decency, respect, and kindness. She made me a much better legislator than I ever would have been on my own. You have been and continue to be a blessing in my life. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to give the mic to Kevin Brooks and then Bobby Wood, if that's okay with you.
Former Representative Mr. Kevin Brooks, you're recognized.
I agree. Thank you, Representative Cochran, for setting all this up for her farewell tour. She is so deserving of that. One thing that I learned serving with you all, my brothers and sisters, is that this place becomes a home away from home, and that this place we become family. And there was no greater family influence on me my entire service than Celeste Thomas. She guided me, she prayed for me, and she kept me straight. And I could never repay her or thank her sufficiently because, like Representative Johnson said, my success is due to her. She's the one that dealt with the constituents, set up the schedules, made the appointments, and made me the representative that I was. So Celeste, we honor you. Love you.
It's a real privilege being back in this chamber again. 28 years in seat number 7. And a lot of members from that time. Celeste worked with me in the office for 26 years, 26 out of those 28. And always a help, always an encourager. And it made me proud. And you're making me proud here in the state now because you're setting the pace for the rest of the country. And they're looking at Tennessee for your fiscal responsibility, your leadership, and the values that you're supporting. And it makes me feel proud because I still feel like I'm a part of the House. And still, this is my secretary.
Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just for some final remarks, Celeste knows I'm a big movie buff. Of course, everyone in this chamber is probably familiar with "It's a Wonderful Life." You know, at the end of that movie, George Bailey's kind of realizes what a different place Bedford Falls would have been had he not been there. Well, I want to assure you that the state of Tennessee would be a very different place had you not been here. There have been truly hundreds of thousands of people that you have helped represent through the different offices you've worked in, over 1 million people you've helped represent. And, you know, those simple phone calls of someone needing help with unemployment or some sort of government permit, that makes a difference in people's lives. That helped put that check on the table the next week. And so you changed people's lives. Tennessee is better because of you. And we're glad you joined us today so we could honor you. And Mr. Speaker, if Speaker Marsh and Speaker Sexton could join us in the well for a quick photo, we'll do a photo with Mr. Yes. Hey, and I also want to honor all these lovely folks up here who worked with Ms. Thomas for so many years. These are all of our great assistants. Mr. Speakers, if you would join us in the well.
We're still on welcoming and honoring anyone seeking recognition. Representative Wendell.
Mr. Speaker, I request the opportunity to address the members of the Democratic Caucus today, immediately after session, on the floor of the House publicly.
Chairman Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to see our colleagues from days gone by, and so tickled to see Bobby Wood. There's just a handful of us that still serve with Bobby. He's such a great example to those of us who started in the legacy that he's left. I rise today in honor of a 10-year-old young lady. Some of y'all remember a little less than 10 years ago, my daughter, Caitlin Grace, made her debut on this floor as a 10-day-old baby. Today, she is making her debut as a 10-year-old. Today is Caitlin Grace's birthday. Please wish her happy birthday, my friends.
Anyone seeking recognition and welcoming honor. Representative Carrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I am honored to recognize my little curly, blonde-haired granddaughter, Olivia Scarlett Carringer, who will be 3 years old tomorrow. And she has requested a dinosaur tea party. What do you think about that, Pawpaw Marsh?
Anyone seeking recognition? Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Marsh. I move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing lying on the desk be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the Senate bills 132, 234, 331, 484, 610, 827, and 1,187 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration.
Leader Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House bills 1,633 be passed on second consideration and be held on the desk to refer to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting with Chairman Faison, I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Chairman moves passage of the consent calendar. Mr. Clerk, any objections filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 75, Senate Joint Resolution 518 has been objected to by Chairman Faison.
Chairman Faison.
No, anyone seeking any.
Oh, anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. We're voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Having received a constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Click on that first one. Yeah. First one.
Mr. Clerk, call up the first bill.
House Bill 1179 by Chair Lady Moody and others relative to political campaign committees. Mr. Speaker, is previously considered and reset for today's regular calendar. The Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Moody, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to roll this bill till the next Wednesday's calendar, please.
Next Wednesday calendar, so ordered. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1443 by Chairman Vaughn relative to education. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1345.
Chairman Vaughn moves to substitute and conform to the Senate Bill 1345, properly seconded. Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I now move passage of Senate Bill 1345 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage of Senate Bill 1345 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman White moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, properly seconded. In discussion on the amendment. All those in favor of adoption of House Amendment 1, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill I lovingly refer to as the Teacher Free Agency Bill. What it does is change the methodology in which teachers are notified that their services will not be retained by an LEA, brings it more into modern times, and will allow for a more seamless transition as LEA staff and teachers decide how to move on with their careers. And with that, sir, I renew my motion.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Bill 1345 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 1345, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 229 by Chairman Vaughn relative to natural gas. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to provide a double header for you folks today. I now move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0271.
Chairman Vaughn moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 271. Properly seconded. Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now move passage of Senate Bill 271 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage of Senate Bill 271 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 is withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
No further amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As our country has developed, energy supplies have typically been in remote areas of our state. However, as residential development encroaches on these areas, this bill contemplates a new way of notification between new developments and existing pipelines. It's been worked on by the interstate natural gas industry, the home builders, and local governments, and I am proud to renew my motion.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Miller, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Representative Vaughn.
I'll
Absolutely.
apologize for not listening and paying attention earlier, but I heard pipeline, and that certainly got my attention, certainly based on what's going on in Memphis, and you're very aware of the pipeline issue in Memphis, are you?
Chairman Vaughn.
Yes, Representative Miller, I am. But first, let me say, I'm shocked and disappointed that you weren't hanging on every word.
Representative Miller.
So your bill, does it have any impact whatsoever on the pipeline issue that's currently a big issue in Memphis right now, Shelby County?
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, Representative Miller. No, it does not have anything. It's not related to it at all. Its origins were not from that. It will have no impact on the situation that folks find themselves in Memphis today.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker Marsh. To the sponsor, and my apologies for not being able to get with you earlier. Why are we changing the current law?
Chairman Vaughn.
Actually, Representative Hardaway, we're establishing new conditions that need to be met whenever a new residential development is being built within 660 feet of a natural gas pipeline. What that does is it allows the developer, there's two requirements here. The developer has to notify the pipeline of their submission of a plan through the local planning body. And as a result, the pipeline has to come out and identify its boundaries of the right-of-way and where its pipe is located. What we're trying to do is to eliminate conflicts between the two that we've seen in other jurisdictions. But it's one of those things to where the pipeline will now have a name and a face of somebody that the developer can deal with. And we're just getting people together so that there's no surprises. There's been incidences of neighbors not realizing that an easement was there. There's been incidences of, as a result of federal regulatory requirements, of a developer constructing something in close proximity to the pipeline, which requires the pipeline to go in and spend millions on an upgrade of that facility. And so what we're trying to do is, if we catch everything early on and get people talking together, then we can hopefully avoid such conflicts.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you. And that's good work. Is there anything in here, either directly or indirectly, that would aid those folks in Memphis and Mississippi who are at risk from the Byhalia pipeline?
Chairman Vaughn.
No, sir. This deals with federally regulated natural gas transmission pipelines. It's not a crude oil petroleum pipeline, which is being considered there.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, sir. Could this language include crude oil, or is the regulatory scheme such that this language couldn't be adjusted to match crude oil pipelines?
Chairman Vaughn.
Well, Representative Hardaway, it has not been contemplated. I can't answer that question appropriately. That would be something that I would be happy to look into, because that's another industry that we could look at. And with regards to what's going on, in my understanding, I'm not have no direct knowledge, but from what I read in media accounts, the issue with the Byhalia pipeline in Memphis has to do with a new pipeline coming through and near existing subdivisions. This contemplates the scenario that is exactly different from that, where you have an existing pipeline and a developer is contemplating building neighborhoods within 660 feet of that pipeline. So it's a two different things, but I'd be happy to look at that issue with you come next January.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. And I like everything you said, except next January. We're at a critical time right now in evaluating the best options for protecting our aquifers. That's the issue at hand now with the crude oil pipeline. So I'm asking you to get with me as soon as possible, not next January, to help me to figure this thing out so that not just those homeowners, but everyone in the region that depends upon the aquifer, that water from the aquifer. That impacts the whole region, especially West Tennessee. So thank you for your initiative. I'm looking forward to working with you as soon as possible to address these other environmental issues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Representative Hardaway, and I too share your enthusiasm for that get together. So we will get on that and start looking at that issue as well.
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Any objection to the question? I see objection. We are voting on previous question. All those in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 74, 19 nays.
Previous question fails. We're back on discussion. Previous question passed. We're back on discussion. We're voting on Senate Bill 271. All those vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, 11 nays.
Now is this? Senate Bill 271, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1040 by Chairman Faison, Speaker Sexton, and others relative to services provided to the state by state officials and employees.
Mr. Speaker, welcome to the well. Mr. Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1040 on third and final consideration, please.
Speaker Sexton moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the next amendment. Call up, let's see, Mr. Speaker, third and final consideration.
Mr. Speaker, State Government Committee Amendment number 2, filed as House Amendment 3.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment rewrites the bill. I'll defer to the Speaker for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption of Amendment Number 3, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of Amendment 3 say aye. All those opposed say no. Aye. Adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendment.
Speaker Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill, as you remember, has been on the floor a few times, and we sent it back to committee. I want to make sure we get a accurate detail of what this bill is. There seems to be some a little bit of information out there. So let me highlight this. First, what this bill does do, it does prohibit a General Assembly member, present and future, from doing any work in the legislative branch, period. What it also does is it does not prohibit you from doing contracts with the local government. That was the second issue. It has been illegal in the state of Tennessee since 1950 to provide goods to the state of Tennessee if you're in the General Assembly. And it has been a Class E felony if you have done that. What this bill does is simply add services to that part of law. And yes, it maintains a Class E felony because that's what the goods crime punishment was. What this bill now does that's before you is two parts based on when you're elected to this General Assembly. If you are elected after July 1st of 2021, you cannot provide services to the state of Tennessee unless you have 4 exemptions. 1, if you work for somebody and have an employment contract and you provide services, that is okay. If you are a defense attorney and you provide free or indigent defense to someone, you can do that. If you are a physician and you have a medical contract as part of your practice, you can do that. The other discussion that we had was if you own a business and you want to run for office, this does not prohibit you from running for office. But what we do say is if you have a contract with the state of Tennessee and you are elected to this body after July 1st of 2021, we ask you to do the same thing that Governor Haslam did, that Governor Lee did. You put that in a blind trust. If you put it in a blind trust, which means you don't have day-to-day interaction, you can be a member of the General Assembly. I do not think it's fair for us in this body to be viewed as Washington, and when you leave here, people think you became richer due to your service. That's not what we're about in this state. Now, for everybody who's in this room right now, it is a common practice for us to grandfather people in because you came in under a different law. And so we are going to grandfather people in. And let me tell you how you are grandfathered in. If you're currently providing or have offered to provide a service, whether or not you were able to provide it, as long as you offered to provide it or are providing it, you can be grandfathered in. And all you have to do is by September of this year, put it on your ethics disclosure that you're providing the service to the state of Tennessee. Not legislative side, that's illegal if you pass this bill, just that you're providing it. Whether you're providing it or have offered, but you didn't get the contract. And then every year thereafter, on April 15th, when you do the disclosure like we did a week ago, you just continue to disclose that service. If you have any question about your service being able to be disclosed or not disclosed, you have 5 months to talk to our ethics attorney to determine if the service that you're providing or have offered to provide should be on the disclosure. If it's not required to be on the disclosure, you don't have to put it. If it is, you do, and you can continue on. It still has the same 4 exemptions. Employment contracts. There's members in here who work for a state entity. You're not harmed by this bill. You don't have a financial interest. If you're doing indigent defense contract, that is perfectly fine. If you're providing medical services, that is perfectly fine. So this bill is not about trying to put anybody in this General Assembly out of business for something that was not the law before they came in. I understand a lot of people have concerns. We should just blanket it all across the board. We don't disagree, but that's not been the practice. And we are not in the habit in our legislation of not grandfathering people in to allow them to continue doing what they're doing when you change the law or you change the rule. That's what this bill does. This bill is an attempt to be transparent so that we know what's going on, so that you can continue doing what you're doing. But realistically, I don't think we ever want to be viewed as Congress where when everybody leaves, somehow they became a millionaire. That's the wrong message we need to send. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Speaker Sexton renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to Mr. Speaker, is this your first bill?
Speaker Sexton.
There may have been some come through without my name on it that y'all passed and didn't know, I guess.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if you will leave my mic on, I'd appreciate it. And I promise you I'll be cordial. To the sponsor, you mentioned, I'm just trying to get some clarification on some of the things you mentioned. And first of all, let me thank you for the clarification. Apparently your JV player wasn't able to articulate it like you're articulating it. You mentioned if you're already contracting or offered to provide contracting, when you are registered as a vendor with the state of Tennessee, is that considered an offer to provide services?
Speaker Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is our intent, is that if you're on the vendor list or if you've offered to bid on something that you have not bid, that would have defined that you offered services but were not guaranteed it. Right.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you for that, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Speaker sponsor. Under the law right now, those members that are contracting services, are they able to contract services to the legislative branch?
Speaker Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They cannot.
Representative Parkinson.
And just for clarity purposes, right now under the law, they cannot provide goods. It's not against the law for them right now to provide services. So if there are any providing services to the legislative branch, or will they be able to continue?
Speaker Sexton.
No, they will not.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the clarification. I think you've done a better job of articulating, and I'll actually be voting for the bill this time.
Speaker Sexton.
Thank you.
Representative Cassada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Speaker, good to see you in the well, and Mr. Chairman back there behind you. I applaud you for what you guys have done. I support what we're doing, and I like to echo what you just said. I support that it should be broader. I feel like, Chairman, I guess I'll address Chairman or Speaker you because I don't know sure whose bill it is, but I feel like we're creating a class of some will be able to perform this function, providing services, and some will not. And 5 years from now, I think we'll have members in here who can and then cannot, and then others cannot. And so I wish you guys, Speaker, I wish y'all had made it much more stricter. I think that would be better, for all of us. I really do. My one real concern is, and I'm hoping you have an answer on it, I'm sure you've thought of this, is the Constitution of the state is real clear. the county and city governments are considered subdivisions of the state. And so my question is, if a member does business with a city and a county, someone back home takes them to court for whatever reason, a court could find that they're violating state law by doing business with local government, and that the Constitution will oversee what we're passing here today. My concern's valid.
Speaker Sexton.
Yes, Representative. To be honest with you, I could sue you for anything that I wanted to either. So, and the court would have to make that decision on that case. But what I will tell you is we ran this through legal. We ran this through our ethics attorney. We ran this through other attorneys that are in our state. And in the bill, it says you are not prohibited from doing local government contracts. That's very clear on what the intent of the bill is, and that's how we're moving forward.
Representative Castro.
Let me close with this. I applaud what you're doing. I think it's the right thing. I just think it's just a little tepid, and I just feel like the Constitution will get somebody in trouble at a future date because of the way it's worded. So, but again, applaud your hard work, and I applaud, I think this is a good step. I just don't think it goes far enough. Thank you.
Speaker Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we're worried about what someone's going to do and saying what the Constitution says or does, we probably wouldn't pass half the bills that we pass, Representative. And so therefore, you can't be concerned about what a court may or may not say or what the Constitution may or may not say is happening until you have that case. But what I can tell you is that members of the General Assembly should not profit off their service. And so that's what this bill gets. Could it be more strict? Maybe. Could it get the votes to pass? Who knows? The bill that you have in front of you is what we think is a fair and balanced approach to, over time, make it to where anybody who's serving in the General Assembly will not be able to provide goods and services without adversely affecting someone who came in under a different law. And that's pretty clear. But what I will tell you is based on our turnover and the number of people here, this bill may only affect 5 or 10 people. We don't know because no one's having to disclose anything at this point. This is merely a way to disclose what you're currently doing. And so you can always come back next year and file a stricter bill and see if you can get it through committee if that's what you want to do. If that's what you want to do next year, Representative, we'll probably help you try to do it. But that's up to each individual member. I'll put something on the floor that they think they can pass that will be a benefit of the state of Tennessee.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I appreciate this. I think this is a small step in the right direction. I think the caucus chairman and I have had discussions. I've told him if we don't clean up our own house, someone else will. Well, this is just taking the broom out of the closet currently. So it's a crime to sell goods to the state of Tennessee, correct? So with this legislation, you're saying if they disclose it now, that crime goes away?
Speaker Sexton.
The way the bill is drafted is if you are currently a member of the General Assembly and was elected before July 1st of 2021, and you disclose and are transparent in the services that you provide, that is not a crime.
Representative Mitchell.
That's my only hiccup with this bill. We're kind of creating two classes, people who were more or less, granting immunity to people who have been violating the law. But like I said, I'm going to support the bill because I think it's a step in the right direction. Let's just build on this in the future because I think you're heading in the right direction. It takes small steps sometimes to get people walking in the correct direction, and you're trying to get 99 cats going in the right direction. And I appreciate that. But when we come back, let's also address the executive branch as well and add them into this because I don't think anyone should be profiting off public service. Like I said, I appreciate what you're doing. And I think everyone in here should see the importance of what you're doing by where you're standing today. And I appreciate, like I said, this bill has problems. I'm going to support it, but you're going in the right direction. Thank you.
Speaker Sexton.
Thank you. What I would say is it's currently a crime to provide goods to the state of Tennessee currently. We're adding services and, if people don't think this is strong enough, then I would think that you, as you said, would be supporting at least this version to get it to that point. But the thing is, you don't commit a crime unless you break the law. The way this is, if you disclose, you're not breaking the law, therefore you're not creating a crime.
Chairman Kumar.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, admire and applaud your effort. Really, it is very much a step in the right direction. My question was about the local government, and you have answered that to some extent. So at this time, a person serving in the legislature is not allowed to sell goods to state government. Does that apply to local government also?
Speaker Sexton.
No. It does not apply to local governments, no.
Chairman.
And so since goods doesn't apply to right, but since you can currently sell goods, if you're a member of the General Assembly, to local government, to the point a while ago where you're going to be challenged when you provide the services, if you've already been providing the goods, that should not be overturned in court either.
Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The other situation, are there exceptions to it in a unique situation? Like, I have a surgical instrument that only my company and I can sell. And if a county or city-owned hospital wants that, I think they should have that. But that's a unique situation.
Speaker Sexton.
Thank you.
In your example, you can still provide that good to the local county-owned hospital or to any other hospital or private businesses in the state of Tennessee.
Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you once again.
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of what you're doing here. I just need clarity on one issue. If, as several members here are insurance agents, and obviously we've got several attorneys, if a member comes up to me and asks me to quote or sell them a home or auto insurance policy, does this legislation prohibit that circumstance?
Speaker Sexton.
No, it does not.
Leader Gant.
And the same thing if an attorney in here provided services to one of the members, whether it be a closing real estate transaction or another circumstance, would it prohibit that?
Speaker Sexton.
No, it does not, because that's a personal contract, not a contract with the state government.
Leader Gant.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question has been called. We have objections. There are exceptions. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 62, 30 nays.
Previous question passes. We're back on the bill. We're voting on the bill. All those in favor of HB 1040, please vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 82, no nays 8, present not voting.
HB 1040, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Mr. Clerk, call up the next bill.
House Bill 1286 by Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, relative to Tennessee State Fair.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 1286 on third and final consideration.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would allow the Tennessee State Fair to move from Davidson County to Wilson County. The Tennessee State Fair and Exposition Commission recently recommended to Governor Lee the Tennessee State Fair should be moved to the Wilson County Fairgrounds. This legislation specifies that the nonprofit Tennessee State Fair Association, in conjunction with the Wilson County Promotions Incorporated, to operate the state fair. This ensures the state fair is not simply contracted to the highest bidder and eliminates uncertainty. In the governor's budget, he has proposed a $5 million budget item for this move. With that, I'll renew my motion.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Marsh. As a lifelong attendee of the Wilson County Fair and good friends and family with many of the volunteers who have really developed a world-class county fair in Wilson County over the years, and as a former member of the Metro Fair Board, I think I can safely say and represent to my colleagues that the State Fair will be in good hands in Wilson County with Randall Clemens and all the others who put on a world-class fair, and I think the state of Tennessee will be very proud. So I appreciate you sponsoring this legislation. Thank you.
Representative Sapinki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just wanted to say, I kind of echo my friend from Nashville here about, I hope that Wilson County continues to grow this. Most state fairs, if you don't know this, will average over 100,000 people a day. We have not been averaging that with our state fair, and with the state of agriculture in Tennessee, I hope Wilson County can push this even further than what it was. I would like to say that thank you to the people of Murray County that made a valiant effort to try to bring this to Murray County, but I will be in support of this bill. Thank you.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to say on the record, we'll vote for and support the bill, but I do think it's somewhat sad day for Nashville, because I think a lot of people here have enjoyed having the state fair in Nashville. I know times change, and Wilson County has done a really good job with their state fair, but I think it's also important. I recognize a lot of different rural parts of Davidson County, believe it or not, that still exist. And so farming and the fair and agricultural is still important to Nashville, particularly parts of my district. So I realize it's time. It's a bittersweet moment because a lot of great memories happened here in Nashville at our fairgrounds. And, I'm hopeful that many of those same folks will still be able to go to Wilson County and enjoy the fair. And I think it will be successful. But just kind of a bittersweet moment. Just wanted to reiterate how, we've enjoyed having the fair in Nashville for many, many years. And I'm appreciative that at least it'll still stay in Middle Tennessee. So thank you.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
I echo all of you all's sentiments. I think it was a great fair here for many, many years. It has dwindled a little bit, and I think with this move that we'll bring it back to prominence and get over 100,000 people a day. Thank you all.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we're at that time of the year when everybody's getting along well and agreeing with one another. So I just want to rise at least once a year. I try to find something that Representative Clemens and I agree upon. And here today, we have found that bill. He's ignoring me right now, but I agree with Representative Clemens and everything he said. So I appreciate his comments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And like many of my colleagues have already expressed, we certainly hate to see the fair leave, particularly myself, because it's in my district. But I do understand that sometimes change must occur, and we must make sure that things are successful. So we wish the best for the state fair and much success for it. Thank you.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's every time I speak, it's double speaker. I'll support this bill. The state fair has been losing money for Davidson County for quite some time. I think Wilson County will do a fine job with it, but it's really sad that no money or investment could ever be found by the state when it was in Davidson County. But now that we're moving it out of county, money seems to be flowing. So I wish it would have flowed a few years ago. Thank you.
Representative Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call previous questions.
Previous question be called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1286, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, 2 nays.
House Bill 1286, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 581 by Chairman Reagan relative to guardianship and conservatorship. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1440.
Chairman Reagan moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1440, properly second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1440 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage of Senate Bill 1440 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as the Senate. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill was brought to me by the County Officials Association of Tennessee, and it's correcting some issues that have come to light since the pandemic with conservatorship. It provides an additional avenue for notifying the next of kin of conservatorship proceedings. Current law allows only certified mail notice to next of kin. A problem exists when next of kin's whereabouts are unknown or extraordinary circumstances. For example, the post office cannot deliver or will not deliver due to natural disasters or pandemics, as an example. This bill alleviates the situation where no address can be found for the next of kin. It also clarifies that medical records attached to a petition for conservatorship are confidential. Current law implies that the potentially disabled person has the burden to request their medical records be sealed by the court. This allows that their attorney may do that for them. The petitioner is still responsible for the cost of publication as applicable. Despite the length of the explanation in your calendars, that is the sum of the bill. I stand ready to answer questions, and I renew my motion.
Let the journal reflect Representative Grills and Chairman Dixie are excused. Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1440 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Camper, aye. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
Senate Bill 1440, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 784 by Chairman Curcio and others, relative to alternatives to incarceration.
Chairman Curcio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 784 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Curcio moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the first amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton, you are recognized. Vice Chairman Sexton, you are recognized.
Move this first one to roll to the hill.
This amendment, I'm sorry, hold on just a second. I've got that. Roll to the hill.
Without objection, amendment number 1, roll to the hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker, is filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to roll to the hill of the amendment.
Without objection, roll to the hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 3 by Representative Griffey, Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Griffey, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and members of the General Assembly. I rise for Amendment 3, and I have a following amendment number 4 to try to address what I see as problem with this legislation. And it has to deal with revocation of probation if someone violates the conditions of probations. As the bill is currently written, it provides for revocation based upon technical violations. And technical violations are violations less than a Class A misdemeanor. Members, if someone is granted probation rather than going to jail and serving a sentence, that's a grant that the judge gives a person to try to get that person to change their behavior. And that's what this is all about, is behavior modification. Nobody wants to put people in jail and have them sit there. It's trying to get people to change their behavior so they don't bother their fellow citizens, and become productive members of society, hopefully. With this bill, if a person commits a Class B misdemeanor, they cannot automatically be revoked. And if they are revoked, it looks like it's 15 days for the first violation, 30 days for a second, 45 for a second, third, or 90. But some of those violations for Class B misdemeanors include engaging in prostitution, solicitation of prostitution, someone resisting an arrest, someone engaging in disorderly conduct, public intoxication, reckless driving, simple assault that involves offensive or provocative contact. Some of the other violations that are simply violations of probation conditions would be refusing to show up when you're told to show up, refusing a drug screen, having a positive drug screen for, say, cocaine, opioids, prescriptions, medications. It would not include meth because meth is a zero tolerance provision. But members, I submit that what we ought to do is allow our circuit judges, they're the best position to evaluate an offender, determine what that offender's needs are, hear the evidence and the proof based upon the probation violation. That's what we hire our judges to do. I think it's very presumptuous. I know it may save the money for the state of Tennessee a little bit, but for the safety of the community, our judges are in the best position to make these decisions day in and day out. And I would urge adoption of Amendment 3 and Amendment 4. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Griffey moves adoption of amendment number 3, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my good friend, thank you. I appreciate your concern with this legislation. I know we've all worked very, very hard on this. I do want to point out, not to kind of get in a back and forth at all, but just that the judge does have the ability to sentence the Class B misdemeanor for a full 6 months as a new offense, even under this bill. So that I feel like is taken care of. But from backing up from a larger standpoint, the policies in question in these bills did not come to us overnight. They're the result of not 1, but 2 years of hard work by a group of stakeholders from every part of the correction system. They're the result of tireless efforts by the governor's task force. They've been vetted by members of this legislature through multiple committee hearings and negotiations, and have been signed off on by leadership of this chamber and of the Senate. But most importantly, I think, and I know this is not your intent, but the proposed amendment, in my view, would eviscerate the primary priority of the governor in advancing criminal justice reform and gut the impact that this bill can ultimately have on our communities. These bills, these policies, they're focused on reducing recidivism, which is the key driver of our prison population. And I'm going to talk more about that when we get on the bill. But the policies in this bill have been vetted. And for the members who are not on the relevant committees that have talked about these for months, I want you to know that they have been flipped over upside down and backwards and looked at as much as this legislature has ever done on any topic. So I appreciate the sentiments of my good friend, but I would ask that we move this amendment to the table.
Proper motion, probably seconded. The parliamentary situation is Representative Griffey has moved amendment number 3. Representative Curcio has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor. Representative Griffey, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the sponsor for those kind words. And my good friend, it's just, I hope every member has had a chance to talk to their circuit court judges and their DAs about this. And, we need a carrot and a stick approach. And if the stick is a little twig when it comes to probation, I don't think we're going to get the results we're looking for. For that reason, I submit it to the members. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Thank you. Parliamentary situation is that Representative Griffey has moved amendment number 3. Representative Curcio has moved that motion to the table. We're voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 78, 7 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion to adopt amendment number 3 is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Amendment number 4 by Representative Griffey, Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the sponsor of legislation, members, for the same reasons, amendment number 4 would address the concerns I've had. I would move adoption. Thank you.
Representative Griffey moves adoption amendment number 4, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I won't prolong this, but I have similar concerns as the last amendment. But members understand this bill is a step in the right direction, and I'm going to talk more when we get on the bill, but this is incremental progress, and incremental progress is good progress because we can take a step forward, we can see how we're doing, we can reassess, and then we can build on that progress or we can adjust as needed. This bill has been vetted by folks all across all 95 counties of Tennessee. We did not arrive at these conclusions overnight, and I submit this to you as the bill that I would like to run as I have it drafted is the bill that I think puts Tennessee in the best posture to lead on this subject. So with that, members, I would ask that we move this amendment to the table.
Proper motion, probably second. The parliamentary situation is Representative Griffey has moved amendment number 4. Representative Curcio has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor. Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Hey, Mr. Speaker, I simply ask that we adopt the amendment. Thank you, members.
Parliamentary situation, Representative Griffey has moved amendment number 4. Representative Curcio has moved that motion to the table. We're voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 76, 11 ayes.
The ayes have it. The motion to adopt amendment number 4 is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to the heel of the amendments. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 makes the bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of the House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton moves adoption amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the 2 bills that we're about to go through here today represent some 3 years of my life. And so I take great pride in the work product that we've produced here today. But my life is not really what's important here today. It's the life of a 3rd grader who sits in my wife's classroom this morning wondering what happened to her daddy. And her father, like 75% of the folks who entered our prisons and jails last year, is a nonviolent person who has a mental health and a substance abuse issue. We all know people like that. I have put family members in the ground who were like that. And they were good people, but they had a problem. What this bill seeks to do is it provides alternatives to incarceration. It says if you've done something against the law where you're clearly harming yourself and yes, maybe harming others, but you're nonviolent, you've got a mental health or a substance abuse issue, we want to do all that we can to divert you from going to county jail or to prison. We want to make sure that you have an opportunity to rehabilitate yourself. That is what this bill seeks to do. It's about alternatives to incarceration. By doing so, we can help that little girl get to see her father when she comes off the school bus at night. But we can also make sure that we separate in our minds, again, who we're mad at versus who we're afraid of. Because as long as we're clogging up bed space with folks that we're mad at, we're not going to have enough space for the people that we're afraid of. Tennessee has got a raging mental health and substance abuse issue. This bill seeks to address that. It also seeks to address the fact that we are incarcerating more people than we ever have before. We're spending well over $1 billion. Now, the 4th largest line item in our budget is the Department of Corrections. And we're at 10% higher than the national average for our rate of incarceration. Yet at the same time, our violent crime rate has gone down. Tennesseans are no more violent. Tennesseans are no more prone to crime than the rest of the nation, yet we're incarcerating 10% more than the rest of the country. So members, I ask you to examine this legislation. Again, the purpose here is to try to create alternatives to incarceration, to try and get as many Tennesseans at home working, raising their own children so that DCS doesn't have to, and so that maybe I don't have to put another family member in the ground. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Kershaw renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. And as the majority leader said earlier, I think we're wading into highly bipartisan territory here, and so I appreciate that. And to that end, I say amen to pretty much everything you said and the need for this legislation. I do have one question, and that's what my concern arises from my concern about private entities involved with incarceration or corrections related facilities. And this bill in section 3 references, inserts language, quote, another licensed treatment program. And then in section 12, we're establishing a mechanism for using state funds to contract to not only with local governments, but also, quote, qualified private entities. So my question is, what's the definition of a qualified private entity, and what type of private business is going to profit under this legislation? I want to make sure we have the right entities that are highly qualified and appropriately licensed, and I just didn't see the definition of that in the bill. So could you address that?
Representative Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate your concern about that. We had a lot of debate in subcommittee and in full about community corrections and the folks that are performing this work now. So this bill would not change who's eligible. Those folks are still able to bid on an RFP or something of that nature. So the bill doesn't really change anything about the types of companies that are available to do this sort of work. It just simply encourages through the judicial process a way to divert more folks to those programs. What we've said all along through committee, or what I've said all along through committee, is the only problem with drug courts, for example, is there's just not enough of them. So it's just creating a much stronger path through the judiciary for that diversion process. But it doesn't change anything about the types of companies or the companies that are available to do the work.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate the intent and the spirit of it, and I support the legislation. I guess I'm just really getting at what you just hit on is, we're spending a lot of money. I would love to see us investing money in more drug courts, more mental health courts across the state of Tennessee. And, the state is, incarceration and these types of things are generally considered an inherent governmental function. And so the more we outsource this and privatize these things, it just raises alarms in my mind, because if you look at the Private Prison Corporation Act in Tennessee law, it reads pretty good, but we all know what that's led to in many cases. So I just want to make sure that we're authorizing the correct types of companies, doing business the right way, and achieving the goal that I believe we're trying to achieve here today. So thank you for addressing that, and I appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Kershaw, anything to add on that? No.
No, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I'm going to sign on to the bill also if I'm not already on it. I think it's important that we do bring to everyone's attention that, and this came from the Commissioner of Corrections, when he wasn't the commissioner at the time. I think he was over one of the institutions, and he said that over 70%, members, if I can get your attention 1 second. The commissioner said over 70% of the inmates that are incarcerated in Tennessee are on mental health medication. Mental health medication. So what that says is we as a state missed an opportunity to get to them before they acted out because of possibly their mental health status. And now we are housing mentally ill Tennesseans in our prisons and jails. So we've supplanted Tennessee mental health institutions for prisons and jails. And so I want you to think about 70%, over 70%. And I thank you for bringing this legislation, that helps to address some of that. And here's something that's important to note too, members. Being smart on crime and being tough on crime does not always mean locking people up. Being smart on crime and being tough on crime means knowing who to lock up and when to lock them up. I always stated, before I was kicked off of the criminal committee, I always stated that there are two types of crimes. Crimes that make us scared and crimes that make us mad. So those crimes that irritate us a little bit. But those crimes that make us scared are the ones that we need to be locking up. Those crimes that irritate us, tick us off some, we need to find a way to get to those individuals. So I want to thank you again, Mr. Sponsor, for bringing this legislation. It's a good start. It's a good step. And I will be signing on, and I appreciate it, and I will be voting for it.
Representative Curcio? No, sir. Representative Sparks?
With sponsor yield. Thank you, sponsor. Just in committee, I thanked you and Governor Bill Lee. Our governor's probably, not only is he pro-business, he's pro-compassion, he's pro-common sense. If you look back at my community, and I hate to call out my own community, it's sad, but the media called them out. We had a situation called PCC, Private Probation Company. They were charged with extortion, settled a $14.3 million lawsuit. And I asked myself, where were the leaders at? Where are all these smart attorneys at? These folks that are serving the constituency, they were nowhere. The media end up helping with some of that. But as far as leverage in the private sector only makes good sense. Leverage in the churches, leveraging folks like men of valor. I think the governor gets it. I think you get it, Curcio. I think the speaker gets it. We need a serious discussion about I don't want to use profanity on the floor, but I sometimes want to be honest with you, because we got to start giving a crap about people. Seriously. We talk about conflicts of interest, all the money up here. Let's set up a strong task force and continue to look at this kind of stuff. That's what's going on. Our country houses more prisoners on the face of the earth than any country here. Why? We can put a man on the moon, but we can't solve these problems. We got a drug problem in this state. We got a drug problem in my community. And I don't want to drop no profanity. Sometimes I want to, because we got to start giving a crap. I read a scripture this morning, Brother Alan Jackson, World Outreach. Somebody sent me a book called Courageous Faith. Courageous Faith. Let's be courageous in our faith. Talk about being the salt and the light. It's hard to be the salt and the light in a dark world, man. It really is. So thank you, Curcio. Thank you, Speaker, for giving a dang about some of these things. And thank you, Governor Bill Lee and Men of Valor and other private sector and churches that are going to have to start stepping up when we see a breakdown in our culture. That's what's going on every day. Every day it's happening. Thank you, sir.
Representative Curcio?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Lear Lamberth?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the chairman and also to the governor. I appreciate y'all's leadership on this issue. I think everyone in this chamber knows how I feel about criminal justice issues. This is one major part of the puzzle on how to make sure that we take a big step forward as a state. Because when folks commit minor violations or minor crimes, that comes with smaller penalties. This really enshrines that into our law. So if a judge is going to put someone on probation or parole, the parole board is going to put on parole or the judge on probation, and they mess up, our hope would be, and I think this is the governor and the chairman and my hope, is that a judge would continue to work with that individual. If they fail a drug screen, if they mess up and miss their probation meeting, if they're going to be under supervision, then supervise that person. Guide them back into the way that we would have them live their lives instead of just giving up on them. Because I've been there. I've seen that in court. It is so easy to give somebody that last chance on probation. Well, if you're sick and tired of dealing with them, if we've at the end of our rope as a society, send them to prison. TDOC can handle them, and they'll do the best they can to still rehabilitate them within the prison walls. But if you're a judge out there and you're listening to this debate and you're willing to take a chance on somebody on probation, really dig deep into their lives. Find out why they were on your docket. Find out why they're on probation. And the parole board, the same thing. Make sure we're giving them the tools that they need. That's why community corrections funding is preserved in this bill. Many of you probably received emails about community corrections going away as part of this bill. That program is not going away. In fact, it is funded in here, and we will have reporting requirements to ensure that those programs are being both developed and implemented at a very high level. This is life and death stuff. Literally, I cannot say it too dramatically. This bill and the next one is life and death, because if we do this well, you can have people that for generations will live life in bounds. If we fail at it, then it literally can cost people their lives. Overdoses, additional crime, recidivism. The goals of this bill are to reduce crime in this state, reduce recidivism, and to change generations of lives. Because if you've got one person that you can change as a part of this bill, it's worth voting for, in my humble opinion. Thank you for bringing it, Chairman, and thank you, Governor Lee, for your leadership on this issue.
Representative Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the leader's remarks. He has been by my side working tirelessly on those task force meetings as well. And so I want to thank him. And many other members who are on this floor have attended those task force meetings. Again, these decisions were not made lightly. They were not made in a vacuum. And I suggest to you that the work product that's before you today is the best that Tennessee can offer, and it puts us on the proper footing moving forward. And I look forward to continue to working on these issues with each and every one of you. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Thank you. Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 784 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? All right, Ms. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 89, one nay.
House Bill 784, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passive objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 785 by Chairman Curcio and others.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's relative to offender reentry.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 785 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kershaw moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roll to the Hill.
Without objection, amendment number 1, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1, filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
I move to roll the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 2, filed as House Amendment 3.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood. One. Chair Lady Hazelwood.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I move to roll to the Hill of the amendment.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 4 by Representative Griffey, Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers and members. I move to amend this legislation, and this part addresses what can happen if someone who's served a sentence, a felony sentence, and they're being released on parole, and then they violate a condition of that parole for something less than a misdemeanor or a new felony offense or above. And instead of having a provision where it's minimum, at most 15 days for the first violation, 30 days for the second, and then 90 days for the third violation, this would simply give the Board of Parole the authority to revoke or sentence someone for something less than a Class A misdemeanor or absconding to not more than 90 days. So what all we'd be doing is giving more discretion to the Board of Paroles to determine how to address this individual who's on parole. And the reason for doing this is again, it's the carrot and stick approach. So if you're a felon, you've been released on parole, and you're going to wonder, well, if I do that cocaine, or if I get in an argument and spit on somebody, it's an assault, or I resist arrest or something like that, the most I'm going to get is 15 days. But if you have to think about it, well, I might get 90 days for screwing up. I think that's a much better incentive. It's a bigger stick, and I think we ought to give that to our probation, our parole board when they're reviewing these sentences. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank the sponsor for the legislation.
You move to adopt. Representative Griffey.
Move to adopt. Thank you.
Representative Griffey moves adoption of amendment number 4, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the amendment. And it's a similar discussion as we had on the first bill, but I do want to strike at the heart of this because, again, these shock incarceration numbers that are built into this bill are something that many of us who worked on these bills for years, we toiled over, because at the same time, we do believe there needs to be a stick. There's got to be a carrot, but what we say is that if we hit somebody with such a huge hammer that they can't come back, we may as well have just reincarcerated them anyway. You send somebody to jail for 90 days, and I would propose to this body that that is not shock incarceration. After 90 days, they have lost their job, they have lost their family, they have lost their house, they have lost anything they could do to rebuild their lives as they've tried to reintegrate after they've left prison. So I agree that there needs to be tools in the tool chest to get someone's attention, to make sure that they remember why they're out and why they want to be on good behavior. I would just suggest to this body that the numbers that we built into this bill were toiled over, and we did not arrive at these lightly. And I had different versions going through. This was not my original thought. But the point is that if we hit somebody with such a huge hammer, we may as well just send them right back to prison, because that's where they're going. If they lose their job, they lose their family, they lose their place to live. So respectfully, and I do respect the intent with which the amendment was brought, I would ask that we move it to the table.
Proper motion, probably seconded. The parliamentary situation is Representative Griffey has moved amendment number 4. Representative Curcio has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor. Representative Griffey, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the sponsor on this. My only comment would be it doesn't require a 90-day sentence if someone violates conditional parole. It simply gives the Board of Parole the flexibility to sentence someone up to 90 days. So it's that threat of what could possibly happen to you. For that reason, I move to adopt the amendment. Thank you.
Parliamentary situation is Representative Griffey has moved adoption of amendment number 4. Representative Curcio has moved that motion to the table. We are voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 76, 11 nays, 1 present, not voting.
The ayes have it. The motion to adopt amendment number 4 is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 5 by Representative Griffey. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor, for this legislation. Members, this amendment would include the provision where the Board of Parole could sentence someone for a violation up to 90 days. But it also adds the additional provision as to who's an eligible defendant, eligible probation or parolee. And it says the person must have at least demonstrated to the satisfaction of the board that the person has made a sincere effort to become a law-abiding and productive member of the community, a desire to obtain gainful employment and provide for an inmate's own self, and the inmate is no longer a threat to other Tennesseans or the property of other Tennesseans. And for those reasons, I submit this is not too much to ask. We add this on so that someone, if they're actually out there making a good faith effort, they will not be subject to this. But if they're not, then they could be subject to regular violation ramifications. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks, sponsor.
Do you move adoption, Representative Griffey?
Move to adopt.
Representative Griffey moves adoption amendment number 5, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Curcio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, similar concerns, and I do respect the intent with which this amendment was brought, and this would certainly be an alternative way to do it. But after 2 years of work on these, we really feel like we've got them in the right spot. And I'll say too that if someone is violent, if they are a threat to Tennesseans, as your amendment describes, there are avenues for those folks. Okay, if somebody recommits or commits a new violent felony, that's going to be treated as a brand new case. So what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we get folks re-entering and reintegrating back into society. Remember, members, 95% of the folks who are sitting in Tennessee prisons and jails will be coming out someday. That means only 5% of them sat before a judge and a jury and they said, you are never allowed to re-enter society. But 95% of them will have that opportunity. And who they are when they get out has as much to do with the programming and the resources that we allow them to avail themselves of as it does their own desire to get better. And I'll be the first to say, you cannot help somebody who does not want to help themselves. But I hear loud and clear from my constituents and from folks across the state of Tennessee that we are willing to help people who will help themselves. And that's what this bill is about. So respectfully, and to my good friend, I would ask that the body move this amendment to the table and move forward with the bill as we have it.
Parliamentary situation. Well, proper motion, proper second. Parliamentary situation. Representative Griffey has moved amendment number 5. Representative Curcio has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of sponsor. Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the sponsor. Members, I just want to share with you, as a former assistant district attorney, I've never seen a situation where someone's out there that's making an honest effort and may have made a slight mistake or something, gets hammered by the judge or something like that and gets automatically voted. It may happen in some other jurisdictions. I haven't seen it, and I've traveled a number of the jurisdictions throughout the state. So I would move that we adopt this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the sponsor.
Parliamentary situation. Representative Griffey has moved adoption of amendment number 5. Representative Curcio has moved that motion to the table. We're voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 80, 10 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion to adopt amendment number 5 is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House is ready for further consideration of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw House Committee Amendment Number 1.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 2 filed as House Amendment 3.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 3, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? On the amendment? No, sir. All right. All those in favor of amendment number 3 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Curcio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I make my next motion, I want to say that this bill has changed my life in many ways. The research that was required to get to this final work product has been, again, not weeks in the making, but years in the making. And during that time, Governor Lee asked Senator Mike Bell and I to co-chair something called the Governor's Volunteer Mentorship Initiative. And before COVID started, we were able to go into Tennessee's prisons and meet with folks that we were mentoring. And I met a young man whose name is Jared. I won't give his last name just to protect his privacy, but his name is Jared. And when we met there at the Turney Center Industrial Complex, he was 90 days from getting out. And it took me aback because I thought I was going to be mentoring and working with somebody who may have 6 or 10 years or more left on their sentence, as most of my colleagues who were there with me did. But Jared was getting out in 90 days. And he got out actually about a month before the COVID crisis hit. And I have walked with him step by step through that reentry process. And I have seen firsthand what it looks like to reenter our society from a Tennessee prison. And Jared is very fortunate. He's got a mother who loves him. He's got a place to sleep. He was able to achieve his his associate's degree while he was incarcerated through THEI, and was able to go on to higher education and is working on his bachelor's degree. But Jared needed help. He needed somebody to help him along that path. There are many opportunities, I'm sure, that he could have had that would have taken him right back, just like 50% of the folks who are walking out of Tennessee prisons today are. But he was different because he had a reentry plan. This bill helps more inmates have a reentry plan. And again, nobody's talking about giving anybody a handout here. This bill helps people who want to help themselves. That's what I'm about. That's what I think you guys are about. I know that's what Tennesseans are about, is helping folks who are willing to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Kershaw renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, Chairman Kershaw, thank you very much for your leadership, and the governors as well on this. And members, this is the companion bill to the one we just passed. And between the two of these, it covers probation and parole in a way that will hopefully make sure, and I'm confident will make sure, that we have a safer Tennessee, because we will have fewer folks that are failing at their probation or parole, and fewer folks that are committing new crimes. When we say recidivism rate, that's what we're talking about. How many folks get rearrested in a new crime after they come through one of these programs? The only thing about this bill that is still missing is an aspect of truth in sentencing. That's a big lift, ladies and gentlemen, a huge lift. And I know Chairman Kershaw and the governor and myself hope that literally within days after this session ending sometime in the next few weeks, that we begin that journey, that collectively we all start talking to our communities about how a 12-year sentence at 30%, while this does the best with that structure that we can, that needs to be changed. That's not how long people are serving in prison. And it is the worst thing in the world you can do to someone who's either a defendant or a victim or their family in the system, to just jerk them around and play with their lives. We should have sentences that are certain. If somebody gets a 3-year sentence, it ought to be 3 years, and there should be a defined plan on how to reenter society. And from the moment they go in, everybody should know, the defendant, the victim, and everybody, what date they're coming out and what needs to be done to prepare them to reenter. This is the best we can do until all of us join together and rewrite the sentencing code so that it has truth in sentencing in the code, and we can make sure to know when they're coming out. Until we go down that journey and go down that path, which I hope will be soon, this will make a massive difference in people's lives. So I ask that you support it, but I also ask that we do not let the grass grow under our feet very long after we leave this chamber for this session before we begin the journey of truly changing the entire sentencing code. And that includes, the last thought on this, really looking at those crimes that have lengthy sentences right now that we may not wish to have as long as sentences, and some of those crimes where folks are just going through a revolving door, where they go in, they serve a small amount of time, they come out, they go in, they come out. There should be some lengthy sentences on the books for those individuals that are truly dangerous or just repeat felons. So again, Chairman, thank you for your leadership on this. I look forward to voting for this, and I look forward to the next step in this process to truly reform how we do criminal justice in this state. Thank you.
Representative Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call for question on the bill.
Previous question's been called. We're on the board. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, 8 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting on the bill. All those in favor, House Bill 785 is amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, nay.
House Bill 785 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 983 by Chair Lady Hazelwood, relative to the Council on Pensions and Insurance. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0708.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 708 without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0708 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage of Senate Bill 708 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very simple bill. It renames the Council on Pensions and Insurance to be referred to as just the Council on Pensions, which if you go back far enough in state history, that's how that council began. In addition, obviously, to removing the name, we would remove any insurance-related legislation from the committee's purview. And that is because both houses in the General Assembly have committees that look at these issues in depth. The bill would also delete that bills reported out of the council shall not be considered by a standing committee unless the committee amendment of the council is attached to the bill. That means that bills would be considered by a committee when their amendment is not attached. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Bill 708 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Hodges, aye. Shaw, aye. Leatherwood, aye. Kumar, aye. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Bill 708, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 476 by Chairman White and others relative to the use of surveillance cameras on interstate highways. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 354.
Chairman White moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 354, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 354 on third and final consideration.
Chairman White moves passage of Senate Bill 354 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Howe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 2 by Chairman White. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Representative White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment names the act after Caitlin Kaufman, a nurse who was on her way to work at St. Thomas West Hospital in Nashville and was shot and her life was taken on Interstate 440. I move to adopt.
Representative White moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to a voice vote? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 3 by Representative Campbell. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Representative Campbell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 3 adds that these cameras can be allowed, a permitted use would include searches for missing or endangered persons. Again, this is a friendly amendment. Move to adopt.
Representative Campbell moves adoption of amendment number 3, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to a voice vote on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 3 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Representative Campbell, for that friendly amendment that we had that discussion, and I appreciate you adding that. Members, if I could give you a brief description, if you would listen closer to what the bill does. This bill, first of all, we named it after Caitlin Kaufman, who lost her life on Interstate 440 a few months back due to a person shooting from their car on the interstate. So we wanted to honor her and her family and naming this after her. But here's what the bill does. This bill will simply allow the Tennessee Department of Transportation to permit law enforcement to place the cameras on interstate and state road right-of-ways for the purpose of aiding in, and this is important, criminal investigations and searches for missing or endangered persons, as the amendment just indicated. Right now, Tennessee is missing an opportunity with one of the most effective deployments of a public safety technology, the automated license plate reader on interstates and state highways. Now, this is important. These cameras cannot be used to enforce monitor, or issue state or local traffic violations. These cameras cannot issue citations for financial responsibility or the lack of car insurance violations. That is part of this. The legislation allows the same LPR technology that is currently used in our police vehicles to utilize on the interstates and help generate leads to help criminal investigations, solve crimes, and find missing persons. The license plate reader, license plates only. The license plates are required by law and displayed publicly. There is no reasonable expectation of privacy in public places like interstate or state roads, since our license plates are public. LPR data is confidential. We passed a bill on this floor April the 8th, and it's waiting the governor's signature that says that these things have to be confidential and they must be deleted within 90 days per statute. Just think, if we had had an LPR on the interstate, that could have helped law enforcement officials narrow down suspects sooner when the Nashville nurse, Caitlin Kaufman, was shot while driving to work at 7 o'clock in the evening on Interstate 440. These cameras are a much-needed tool for law enforcement, as we are crippled with shootings on our interstates currently, carjackings, drag racing, prison escapes, stolen vehicles, as well as amber and silver alerts. Pending any discussion, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman White renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I understand, the deployment of these cameras will help criminal investigations, help solve crimes, and find missing persons. And they cannot be used to enforce or monitor or issue state or local traffic violations. If I had a crime committed against me or my family, I would love to know that our law enforcement would have this tool to catch our perpetrators. And I understand that these cameras are already being used in trooper cars. So I think this is a great piece of legislation, and I will be voting for it. Thank you for bringing it.
Chairman White.
Thank you so very much. That is totally correct, and I appreciate those comments.
Okay. Representative Calfee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would sponsor yield?
Chairman White.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to ask you to speculate, but can this be a good tool to try to stem the great problem we have in Tennessee with all our interstates with human trafficking?
Chairman White.
Yes, sir. Anytime. Now, remember, this is for criminal investigations only. They're not used for any other thing. But if there is a criminal investigation, the way these things work, and let me just explain a little bit to answer your question. They only read the license plate. They do not see the car as far as whether it's a Ford or Chevrolet or it's red or it's green. It just tags the license plate. And they are stored at that point. And that's all. And in 90 days, they go away. But if there is a criminal investigation by our TBI or our state law enforcement, and they get a hit and they say, well, that happened, the incident you just brought up, there's a trafficking situation, and they have a license plate, they can feed it into the system. And if it gets a hit, then they can say, well, that car was last seen on such a day heading west or heading east. So it's just a vital tool for criminal investigations. So yes, sex trafficking, yes, it would be a great tool for criminal investigations.
Representative Calfee. Oh, all right. Representative Whitson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the sponsor yield?
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you also for bringing this legislation. Chairman Howell and I had the opportunity to see a demonstration of these LPRs from the Tennessee Highway Patrol. And you're right, these will go a long way in helping us solve these serious crimes that we have. In fact, I want to thank Representative Beck for the idea to name this after Caitlin Kaufman. I talked to her mom, and she wants something good to come out of the tragic death of her daughter, and I feel this is one way we can do that. This young lady came down here from Pennsylvania. She loved Nashville. She always wanted to be here in Nashville, and she was a intensive care nurse on the way to work. And TBI feels they could have solved this crime or identified the perpetrators within 4 hours if these cameras had been in place on our interstates. So thank you for bringing this legislation, and thank you, Representative Beck.
Chairman White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that. Yeah, it breaks all of our hearts when an innocent person going to work and someone just randomly shoots them a car and takes their life. This can help our law enforcement solve the crime quicker. And I think when those who commit such violent crimes on our interstates, which they are doing now, that if we can help law enforcement solve crimes quicker, we're much better off. Thank you.
Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, and I have about 3 questions. I believe that the primary duty of government power is to defend unalienable rights of Tennessee people, which would make me question the role of surveillance by government. But I've been told first that these are all independent cameras that are going to be purchased by independent cities, and there will be no tie of them together to one database. And then I was told later, no, the THP is going to run this program. And so I'm asking some clarification there. Is this all independent cities, or is there a central database that's going to be run that this information is fed into?
Chairman White.
What I understand, most of our cities already have these. I talked to a small community that my district backs up to. They already have 22 of these cameras within their communities. So these cameras are being used in our communities. No, this is for our state law enforcement, where in cooperation with TDOT, they would mount these for their purposes of criminal and investigations. Where they use this for the NCIC, which is a database where you can then, if there's criminal activity, then they can use it for the hits on that. So no, it's a state issue, state law enforcement.
Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was an issue where this is not going to be used for traffic or civil issues. I'm just asking you, if a man knows his wife is running around on him and he knows the tag number of the guy she's running with, and he knows that they went by this camera, can a lawyer in a civil divorce case subpoena, if it's within 90 days, subpoena the information that's in that database?
Chairman White.
Not according to this bill. It has to rise to the level of a criminal investigation. And no, not in this legislation.
Representative Halsey.
One other question. To me, surveillance is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. And I got several problems with this, and I told you that before. Specific seizures under the Fourth Amendment have to have an individual and a location specifically named, and that doesn't happen here. I understand the goal. I really do, especially after a law enforcement career. I understand the goal. I have some real problems with it. Thanks.
Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. I appreciate the intent of the legislation. It's always my concern with surveillance that this step legitimizes the next step. And we'd heard earlier in someone else's comments, well, they're already being used in the troopers' cars. And I'm sure at that time when they put them in the troopers' cars, they said, well, we're just using them in the cars. We're not going to put them on the interstates. In this very bill, it rewrites a section where these cameras are used in work zones for traffic enforcement. And I know your bill is just it didn't change that part. That part was already in code. But when they did that, I'm sure they said, well, it's just work zones. We won't use it for anything else. And so now we're allowing more cameras to be placed on the interstate system. And while they're not being used for traffic enforcement or any other, or any nefarious means right now, they're there. And this step will legitimize the next step. And, we'll come back in a few years and say, well, you know what? The cameras are already up. Let's just go ahead and use them. Because it may not be us in this room the next time that this issue is addressed. And I feel like we're paving the way to just make it a little bit easier for that government surveillance. And again, I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist or, to get out there on a ledge. I understand the intent. I worry about its ultimate destination. And so that's why I'm a no. It's just, I know it's that typical slippery slope argument, but I think it's a legitimate argument and a legitimate concern. But I just wanted to express those, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Chairman White.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all those comments. I've been working on this bill for the past years. You remember we had this before, working with law enforcement. Our state law enforcement says this is a tool. I wish we wouldn't use the word surveillance. I don't see the word surveillance in these. This is just using the technologies that's available to us, that it's just recording and putting in a database in case it's needed in the future for a criminal investigation. Same thing as if I was standing on the side of the road writing every license plate that went by, and if I had the ability to do that, and then I'm turning it into someone at the end of the day and say, here's all the cars that went by that day. It's just technology collecting the data in case it's needed. And sometimes it is. I'm told the bombing on Christmas Day, instead of looking for the VIN number and all that debris, they could have gone back and looked at these cameras and tracked that down quicker, and they would have found out who did that a lot quicker. We've had 89 shootings from the interstate down in West Tennessee last year, 39 already this year. Innocent people are in danger, and if we can use this technology, then it would be, we'd all be better off.
Representative Cochran.
And Chairman, thank you. And I appreciate that. And just one quick follow-up, and I guess that's my other concern with it. A lot of times that's sort of the excuse that we use, or the reason that we use to put more of these measures in place, is it's for your protection. Don't worry about it. We're just going to use it for your protection. And again, we think about that initial reason that we put it in place, and we don't think about what it could be used for in the future. And many liberties are taken under the reason of, oh, it's for your protection. But again, I appreciate you. Thanks.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, thank you so much for this legislation. It is much needed. Two things I want to say just to everyone here. To the privacy concerns or surveillance concerns, even though surveillance is not mentioned in the legislation. Right now, we have in law license plates that are required on all vehicles to travel on state roads, and they cannot be covered up. We also currently have in law tinted windows. You cannot have vehicles pass a certain tint. So I think right now the privacy issue, all this is doing is reading the license plate. It's doing nothing more than if you were walking down the street yourself and looking at the street. Secondly, in my neighborhood where I live, we have these already. They're monitored by the police department. A few years ago, a neighbor of mine had a car stolen out of their driveway. They were able to catch that person very, very quickly. They would not have caught them had this technology not been there. And with that, I just want to again thank you for bringing this.
Chairman White, you have anything to add?
No, thank you very much for those comments.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my question is simply with regards to, I'm not sure which amendment finally went on this, but the surveillance cameras used to enforce or monitor traffic violations within work zones, is that language still in the bill?
Chairman White.
Yes, that is current law, and when we rewrote the bill for this, we had to put that back in there. This doesn't address that's already current law, and I'm glad you brought that up. Currently, the Tennessee Department of Transportation in work zones already has the ability, if there's a safety issue, things going on, they can use these cameras already in work zones for the safety of those working on our roads. But that is current law. It's not part of this. It's just back in the code. Had to put it back in the amendment.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that clarification.
We have a long list, people. Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, you've talked a lot about the data that's collected here. What type of data is actually collected and kept?
Chairman White.
The only data collected is it records the license plate that went by, nothing else. It doesn't take a picture of anything else other than the license plate.
Leader Gant.
So there's no internal name, addresses of the ownership of that vehicle, prior history that's kept in any kind of database for the owners or previous owners of that vehicle?
Chairman White.
No, it's the current owner of that car. As you say, our license plates are public, and if the state law enforcement has a hit and they say, if this license plate is in there, then of course they go back to our traffic safety where all that information is on, who owns the car, and that's how they start their investigation.
Lear Gant.
How long is this data kept?
Chairman White.
90 days and then it's purged.
Leader Gant.
And how is it purged?
Chairman White.
However you purge digital, it's just deleted, it's gone.
Leader Gant.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I wasn't able to talk to you about it earlier, but so is there any sharing of this data with federal agencies or local municipalities? How is it, once a license plate is identified as a hit, how is that broadcasted with all agencies, or is it?
Chairman White.
No, it's not broadcasted. And on April the 8th, when we passed House Bill 809, that made this information confidential in the 90 days. But no, it cannot be shared. It's confidential.
Leader Gant.
So in a certain event where you've got a child abduction, or there's a federal case out there that's been longstanding and a hit on a license plate would help in a situation with a federal investigation. So if there's no communication, how is this really going to be effective outside of THP?
Chairman White.
Well, I think what you're referring to is mainly like when we have an Amber Alert within our state. If they're, and I think it does go through the NCIC. So there may be at that point, there may they come to the state and say, we have information on this. Would you be able to help us out? I would assume that may through the NCIC, but it's mainly, and I really do like the fact that if a 5-year-old, 6-year-old child is kidnapped, especially from your home, and there's a license plate, then it'd be nice to know which direction that car is going in. That is a criminal investigation.
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just got a couple of questions on this. So you said it's an open criminal investigation. Can this create the necessity to open a new criminal investigation with the data they collect?
Chairman White.
No, this is specific. If there is an incident where something has happened, a child has been kidnapped, there is a bombing, or someone has been shot on interstate, and there is an open investigation at that point in time, trying to get leads, it can be used for that and only for that.
Representative Mitchell.
And secondly, I'm kind of along the same lines of Representative Cochran. There was a bill already this year for this to go on to financial responsibility insurance and other things. So if we're creating the system already and putting it in place, that slope just got a little bit more slippery than this is already making, for that next step and the next step. So I just have a problem with, and Representative Halsey, brought up, seizure, illegal search and seizure. I mean, there are just so many constitutional problems, I think, of going down this road. I think your goal is admirable. We want to get there, but what's the cost to our Constitution to get there?
Chairman White.
Thank you for those comments. And by the way, let me add, this is already being used in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Kentucky's in the process of installing, Florida, and Virginia. We had 2 escaped convicts in West Tennessee, and we didn't find them until they were able to get down into, I believe it was Alabama and Georgia, where they started picking them up on these LPRs. They called them down there. We could have called them in Tennessee if we were allowed to use them. Technology's there. It's contained data, and it's only there in case our law enforcement needs it, in case someone commits a criminal act against the innocent citizens of Tennessee.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor Yield.
Chairman White.
Yes, sir.
Chairman White, I would have to ditto the comments of many of the colleagues on the floor as well as it relates to needing to do something about this epidemic that's happening all over the country. It is a problem. The shooting, not only the shooting, the fast cars zooming by doing 100 miles an hour, it scares the hell out of you when you're driving. It really frightens us. It's a real problem. And on the other side of the equation, we talked about our constitutionally guaranteed right for privacy and things of this nature. My concern right now would be whether or not the current technology, can they utilize that technology to look in the car to see who's in the car? Is there any way outside of the license plate, can you see who's in the car?
Chairman White.
No, sir. This just records a license plate, the license plate, which is public on our interstates.
Representative Towns.
Is it real time where there's somebody sitting there actually looking at it, or is put it on a record and you can go back and retrieve it?
Chairman White.
These are not real time. They're just permanently stationed. Now, if you got a police car there acting on something, that they may be able to do it real time, but not these.
Representative Towns.
Thank you for that. I have to side with you as it relates to we needed to do something about it, but we need to really look at some other stuff too. I had some bills in the past where you would catch these people and take their automobiles and give them some jail time and some other stuff too. So I'm going to listen to the rest of the debate to see how I will cast the vote on this thing, but thank you for the effort as well.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, first, I support the bill. And I think if we're going to engage technology to help us to fight those criminals who already are using technology to carry out their criminal activity, that this is a fine way to expand what we're already doing. The only questions I have are about storage, access, making sure that the data is protected and that we limit the access to such data to those agencies, those criminal investigatory agencies. Would you put that on the record, please?
Chairman White.
Yes, sir. Let me read what we passed. And let me recognize Representative Powell. He carried House Bill 809. The bill that we passed on this floor, 86-1, back on April 8th. Captured plate data from automated license plate reader systems must be treated as confidential and shall not be open for inspection by members of the public as used in this subdivision. It goes on. But yes, answer your question is you are correct.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. We've had any number of men, women, children to have been shot minding their own business, going down the highway, going down the expressway, going down the streets, and we've got to get a grip on this activity. We've got to start figuring out how to help to alleviate the onslaught of sex trafficking. And we've got any other number of activities, terrorism, to where this technology can help. The caution is to make sure that we continue to give oversight. And that's our job, to continue oversight, to continue to fine-tuning the legislation that's being passed now, to continue to fine-tuning it in the future. But this is an excellent way to move ahead, to advance our job to protect the public. I support the bill, Chairman White, and I urge all my colleagues to think about your constituency and the need to protect the public. Thank you.
Representative Davidson County, I see you. You're on the list, but you're quite a ways down. Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the sponsor, thank you for this bill. It was vetted quite extensively in transportation sub, transportation full. A lot of the same questions we're hearing today were some of the questions that were answered. And I don't know if I can add to the discussion or not, but it's important to remember that these cameras are already in use in Tennessee. There are 40 THP cars that have these now. There are several towns in Tennessee that already have the stationary cameras on poles on local city streets. What we're doing, if this bill passes, is expanding that to allow them to be on poles on state and federal highways in Tennessee to enhance the criminal investigation and the Silver Alert, Amber Alert systems that are so important in this society today. You gave several examples of how other states have helped us find criminals that have crossed state lines who committed crimes in Tennessee because we do not have access to these stable cameras. Chairman Whitson mentioned that we're given a demonstration by the THP of how these cameras work. And I was amazed at the technology. And I asked the trooper, I said, let's pretend that I drove by and the camera saw my license plate, what would happen? And he said, nothing, unless you're on the NCIC. That's the National Criminal Investigation or Investigation Center list. If you've committed a crime and they have your license plate, you drive by, it's going to see you and it's going to ding, and they're going to probably stop you. I asked him how he had utilized this in his experience as a trooper. He said probably the best example he could give me was he had recently, in recent weeks, had a hit from the LPR in his vehicle on a known domestic terrorist. I think those are the people that we're wanting to catch and put away. It would also greatly enhance the Silver Alert system, and I'm thankful for this amendment that was put on the bill. I think it's a great tool. As someone who likes history and likes to read about history, and I do watch the History Channel, yes, I'm one of those nerdy guys. But it was interesting to learn about a new technology that came into being around 1900 or so. It's called fingerprints. You're familiar with fingerprints? It's interesting that some of the same comments we're hearing today were the same comments that were said about fingerprints. It's going to create a database. It's going to invade our privacy. Well, we know what the results has been in the last 100 years or so. I look at this as a tool. It cannot be used to check your license to see if you have liability insurance on your vehicle. It cannot be used to write citations if you're speeding. It's only for criminal investigation. I like this bill. Thank you for bringing it. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next on the list is Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And no, for whomever just said that, I'm not going to call a previous question. I just want to turn to the language of the actual bill. I think we have asked some really good questions of the sponsor today, and I wanted to point out, I mean, these are the guardrails that prohibits the slippery slope from occurring. I mean, these cameras are out there all over the place right now, and the sponsors, I mean, this bill literally says you may only put up, as the chairman said, a card reader type camera. Like, it's not going to be a surveillance camera. It cannot write tickets or issue tickets. It cannot be for any other purpose. So right now it's allowed for lots of different purposes. And there's a real question as to what they can say yes and no to. So they're saying yes to a lot of different types of cameras. Look in your districts, talk to your local folks. That's happening now. This bill puts guardrails on that and says, no, we are not comfortable with any other type of camera, but a simple license plate reader that can have a BOLO or anything else entered into it, and it triggers on the information it's gotten. It doesn't keep anything else. It doesn't record anything. It's not taking pictures of anybody. This is the way to actually shackle the surveillance state out there and make sure that it doesn't come to Tennessee. I look back at the language of the bill again, and that's just my humble interpretation of it. And I would like for the sponsor to say that that is his intention. If it is, for us to put constraints and guardrails on what can be allowed out there, and that we say here and no farther.
Chairman White.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Leader, I appreciate that very much. Being someone with the legal background you're not, I appreciate you bringing that added clarity. That is exactly what this bill will do. We can use this technology, but you also prevent the slippery slope. So thank you.
Next up, Representative Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call for the question.
Question's been called. We'll find out if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Proper motion. Previous question. Is there any objection to it? I only see 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So we're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Kershaw, aye. Ms. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 65, 26 nays.
Previous question prevails. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 354 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 54, 32 nays, 4 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 354 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a message calendar.
Message calendar. Call up next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 235 by Chair Lady Littleton and others relative to purchasing and procurement. On April 19, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 235 for Senate Bill 1125, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 235 as amended.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chair Lady Littleton moves to concur in Senate Amendment Number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment Number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 86, no nays.
Senate Amendment 1, having received constitutional majority, I declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 462 by Chairman Sapicki relative to education. Mr. Speaker, on April 15, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 462 for Senate Bill 1340, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 462 as amended.
Representative Sapicki, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate has declined to receive the information on this study. They trust the Education Committee of the House to make the decisions. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I move to concur with Senate Amendment Number 2.
Representative Sapicki moves to concur in Senate Amendment Number 2, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Powell.
Could you just give a brief reminder about this amendment, please?
Representative Sapicki.
The amendment or the bill, Mr. Speaker?
The Senate amendment.
Senate amendment. All it does is in the very first sentence of the bill, it has the reporting going to the Senate Education Committee and the House Education Committee. The Senate has withdrawn that they don't want to be notified, so the House Education will be the only one notified on this study.
Representative Powell, good. Anyone else have a question? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker Saxton. And just in layman's terms, sponsor, are you saying that the Senate doesn't want information to help them make better decisions regarding education?
Representative Sapicki.
I think to answer that question, I think they may have deferred over here to our wisdom.
Representative Hardaway.
So they are acknowledging the superior talents of the House. Thank you.
Representative Sapicki.
We stand before you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment Number 2, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Amendment Number 2, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1609 by Representative Weaver relative to Carthage. Mr. Speaker, on April 19, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 1609 for Senate Bill 490, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 1609 as amended.
Chair Lady Weaver at her desk.
Thank you, Speaker. I wish to roll to Monday's message calendar.
Without objection, roll to Monday's message calendar. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Chairman Kumar, you're recognized. At Chairman White's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to add House Bill 830 to Monday's message calendar, April 26.
Without objection, so ordered. Members, real quick, we're going to make a motion for next week. Just kind of give you an update since we're waiting here. So it's looking like we're progressing very well. Hopefully next week, sometime midweek, we will have, if all things go well, a budget on the floor Wednesday, Thursday, hopefully. I will give you the benefit of the doubt. We might not be here Friday, but as you know, usually as you're trying to pass the budget, there is a chance that we are here Friday. So I give you just notice that we may be here on Friday. We'll let you know next week so you can be prepared all week. We're getting ready to make a modified flow motion is what they're going over to help us next week because that's the normal process that we'll do. We'll have a caucus meeting, I'm sure both will, to explain it to new members on what that means. But it does look like if everything goes well, we are progressing to be out by the first week of May. And that's what it looks like. As we wait, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we have a message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House Bill 1233, substitute for the Senate bill on the same subject amended and passed by the Senate.
Monday's message calendar. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have one bill that passed out of a full committee before or after the deadline to be able to make it onto the other full committee, and that is House Bill 880. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I move that House Bill 880 be heard in the Criminal Justice Committee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
All right, members, it's that time of year for the flow mode. This is a modified version of the flow motion. So the end is certainly near for session. This will include certain bills that are in finance, that are moving through finance at the time. This will include the budget bills. That is all it will include. There's a certain representative that is near and dear to my heart from Davidson County that will ask me this in a moment, but that is all it includes, is those bills that we are suspending the rules for. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move that the portions of the following rules be suspended for House Bills 750, 1211, 679, 57, 1365, 39, 516, 1276, 599, 534, 854, 1150, 124, 322, 55, 341, 530, 540, 729, 1230, 881, 455, 1497, 442, 202, 1540, 488, 150, 1154, 1152, 1151, 1153, 1010, 1437, and 1204. Rule number 49, the 48-hour rule, so that all bills moved from calendar rules can be set on the next floor calendar. Rule number 49, the 25 bill limit rule, so that more than 25 bills may be placed on the calendar for final consideration on any one day. Rule number 59, notice provision, so that all bills from the Senate with messages can be announced and or automatically placed on the next message calendar. Rule number 67, so that committee and subcommittee meetings can be held at times other than those specified in the House weekly schedule and with less than 72 hours of notice. Rule number 71, the 24-hour rule requiring all amendments to be available to members 24 hours before consideration on the floor. Rule number 83, Part 1, so that all bills reported out of subcommittee can be heard on the next full committee calendar without waiting a week. Rule number 83, Part 1, so that all bills reported out of committee can be heard in the next committee or subcommittee without waiting a week. Rule number 83, Subpart 1, so that items in committee and subcommittee can be placed on the next calendar, notwithstanding the Wednesday 3:30 deadline for placing bills on notice.
You've heard the motion, properly seconded. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. The bills that you just read, for the record, Leader, were the bills that are considered to be under the sweeper amount. Is there anything around that language that we need to be thinking about? And do you expect that we will be looking at the budget maybe Thursday of next week?
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Leader. And we do not have a sweeper in the House. We obviously balance the budget down to the penny. There is a Senate sweeper that includes bills under 50,000. The bills that I have indicated are within that category and are moving through the Budget Committee. Our Budget Chairman and Subcommittee Chairman in the Budget Committee have moved some of those bills through. That is not an indicator in any way, shape, form, or fashion, from my understanding from our budget team behind me here, that there are not many other bills that may very well move through the budget cycle and be funded. This is just an indicator of the ones that are already moving and the 4 budget bills.
Leader Camper.
And Mr. Speaker, you expect that maybe we will be looking at the budget on Thursday of next week, or sometime next week?
Once the House and Senate come to an agreement on the budget, it will take approximately 24 hours for the wording or for the language to be approved and signed off on. Depending on what day that is, you could expect 24 hours later. At the earliest, even if the language was agreement came in on Monday, you wouldn't be able to have the language ready until Tuesday, which would push it to Wednesday. So at the earliest, I think you could see a budget next week would probably be more likely Wednesday, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be on Thursday or Friday. But as always, the budget will lie over one evening. If it goes through committee on Wednesday, it will lie over on Thursday. If it goes through on Thursday, it could lie over till Friday. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, for members who may want to do prepare an amendment to the budget, what is that timeline for them?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, it would be 2:00 the day prior to whenever that appropriations calendar would be set for.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the leader is right. I want to just ask, if we suspend the rules, are we suspending the rules that have traditionally been suspended during a flow motion and no other rules?
Leader Lambert.
And yeah.
Oh, sorry. We'll take it one at a time. Leader Lambert.
No, in fact, this is a modified version of the flow motion that is significantly more limited than previous flow motions. So in essence, this is a cut down version from the regular flow motion that you and I have been used to for years that is a pretty broad suspension of the rules. This is a very, very limited suspension of the rules for these specific bills and only those 8 items that I listed that deal mainly with scheduling.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you. And let me be a little more clear. This is a narrow flow motion in terms of its scope, as you say, but the suspension of the rules in terms of the quality of the rules suspended, how it affects the process, these are the same rules we suspend in every flow motion. Is that correct? You're just limiting its application.
Leader Lambert.
I mean, to my friend from Davidson County, all of these rules are of great quality, both those we are suspending and those we are not. But yes, this is only suspending those we normally suspend.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you.
Representative Love. Oh, Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for a little further clarity, when our wonderful leader, and I'm talking about the Democratic leader, Leader Camper, when she mentioned, I asked a question in regards to amendments being prepared, and we got the response from the clerk. Is that 24 hours? And it was 24 hours, correct? No? Can you tell us again one more time?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Clerk, Mr. Speaker, thank you. That portion of the rules have not changed. It's just like the rules are now. It's 2 p.m. the day before the bill is to be heard.
Representative Parkinson.
And thank you for that, Mr. Clerk. And can you explain that?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, it's 2 p.m. the day before the bill is to be heard on the floor.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you for the clarity. 2 p.m. Members, I think this is important for you to note. Amendments, appropriation amendments, or amendments to the budget, 2 p.m. before it's to be heard on the floor. Correct?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that's correct.
Representative Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to that point, obviously, members, this has been a months-long process on this budget. And while the member is accurate on the timing for budget amendments, feel free to resist filing amendments unless you absolutely feel like it's just necessary to the future of the great state of Tennessee. The fewer amendments are filed, the better and quicker we will move through the process of voting on and passing, hopefully, a phenomenal budget. So again, that's the deadline, but I just wanted to bring up, if you feel the desire to show restraint on filing budget amendments, I think the budget chairman would definitely appreciate that.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since I've been in this body, I think usually when there's been a flow motion, that motion has been provided to us to review. And I realize the leader, and this is specific to some other bills, but I don't know if this is available on the dashboard or for us to look at or review. I know probably not because this is a motion to suspend the rules, but I would just make the leader a request when we do go through the full flow motion, if he could please make that available. And I appreciate he's making that available here now, but usually that's provided to us a little bit in advance. And then we go about voting on it. I just hate to set a precedent here where we're adopting something and haven't had fully chance to read it. So I would just make that request when we do move to a full flow motion that we have plenty of time to review it so we fully understand what we're doing. And with that, I just wanted to, he's welcome to respond, but I want to make that comment.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and absolutely agree. I mean, if it were a full flow motion, suspending more, and I handed you a hard copy, and I know that it's a short time, hopefully until we vote on this, but I did want you to have that. so that you have a hard copy. And I've got that at my desk for any member that would like to look at it. But that's the other reason why I read it. It's a very limited flow motion, and I wanted to read out loud exactly what is included within that so the members would hear it. Instead of just making a motion to suspend the rules, to actually read that out and see that this is a very limited version. If we did a full flow motion, I'm looking at the speaker, and I think he's nodding that we would definitely let that lay over and everybody would have a chance to review it.
Correct. Any further discussion? Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting with Chairman Wendell, Democratic Caucus is actually going to meet in the library immediately following session.
Thank you. Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, members, especially the Shelby County, I want to remind you of the wait for Senator Roscoe Dixon this weekend. Friday, Serenity Funeral Home. There's going to be a wake as well as a celebration of life. The wake starts at 4 o'clock until 6, and from 6 until about 8 is going to be the celebration of life. Those of you that can, I hope you will. Those of you that can't, send your prayers to the family. Thank you, sir.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, listen up. If you've got a bill that is in criminal justice full, I'm announcing a new time. So just heads up, everybody. This will be a Tuesday at 1:30 will be criminal justice full, and that will be in House Hearing Room 1. So Tuesday, 1:30, House Hearing Room 1, criminal justice full committee. Thank you.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, as I announced yesterday, and I'm repeating again today, the Joint Government Operations Rule Review meeting will be Monday at 11 a.m. This is a change from yesterday's announcement. House Hearing Room 3. Please note that change to House Hearing Room 3. The full House Government Operations Committee will meet on Monday at 1 p.m. in House Hearing Room 1 at 1 p.m. Please note that change. That amendment filing deadline for the House Government Operations Committee remains Friday at close of business. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appropriations Subcommittee will meet on Tuesday, March 27th at 3 o'clock in House Hearing Room 1. You will be contacted.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, with your indulgence, I have two very important announcements. The first one I'd like you to know is my intern, Kiara Miller, is up here. She's from TSU, and she's served us very well. Y'all welcome her. And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I would like y'all to know for the remainder of this year, all of my bills will be sponsored by a speaker, and he will be in the well passing my bills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I do have to sign on first. Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, calendar and rules will meet 2:30 on Monday, 2:30 on Monday. Members, if you have a bill that passed out of committee this week, your window is closing. You need to put that bill on notice with our office by 5 o'clock on Friday to be heard Monday at 2:30. We're reaching the point where we will no longer be able to roll bills. If you want your bill heard this session, you need to put it on notice by Friday at 5 o'clock. Calendar and rules will meet 2:30 on Monday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, every once in a while you come across a gem that you didn't know was there. Our very own Commissioner of Labor, Jeff McCord, I came across a book that he wrote. It's called Awkward Grace. If you want to read a well-written, beautifully compassionate, faith-based book called Awkward Grace, get a copy of that. I could not put it down. It is a beautiful story set up in Kingsport, East Tennessee, where Commissioner's from. Awkward Grace. Get a copy and read that. It is beautiful.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the local government committee will hear our final calendar and our special calendar next Tuesday. That is the 27th. We've had a time change. We will still meet in House Hearing Room 1, but instead of 12 o'clock, we will be meeting at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Finance will be meeting 9 o'clock on Monday. If you had a bill that passed out of the Marathon Finance Sub meeting yesterday, then you will need to be in Finance full Monday beginning at 9. On Tuesday at 3, Chairman Williams will be chairing the Appropriations Committee meeting. And directly following that, we'll go straight from that to Finance Sub. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. Mr. Speaker and members, I just wanted to publicly thank all of the interns from the Office of Minority Affairs. If you're here, wave your hand. Y'all have done a wonderful job. I know it's been different, but thank you so much for your service to our state.
Chairman Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to mention the fact that sometimes we feel like that we don't get to voice our opinion on certain legislation that comes across this body. And I know that it's a tough call and we don't see everybody or don't know who's on the list, but many times our constituents, they don't have any other means of knowing how we feel about it or how that we're representing them if it didn't come through our committee. And I'm not holding anyone accountable, and I'm not saying that anyone does it on purpose, but I would ask that we would be considerable toward people that may want to speak on certain legislation before the question is called. Or if the question is called, consider the fact that there may be someone that's wanting to speak on a certain piece of legislation. And if I may, Mr. Speaker, I have one other request. We've got 2 colleagues that are in the hospital or having a real bad time, and I'd like for us to stand, if we would, and offer a word of prayer. I'd like to offer a word in prayer on behalf of David Byrd and Mike Carter and their family. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you that we're able to come to you with every need that we have, and we know that we are failures within ourselves. We're just sinners saved by grace. But your healing hand and your presence, Lord, in our life, no matter what that we're going through, will give us the hope of another day. And we know that your will is always best for us, no matter what it is. Just help us to accept that. Help us to accept your will. But I pray that you would be with these 2 families, David Byrd and Mike Carter, their families, their need, their personal health issues. I pray that you would just help them and touch them, because we know that if we call upon you, we're calling upon the one that is able not only to hear us, but you're able to repair, heal, fix every wound in our life, if it be your will. But if not, Lord, we have the opportunity to know you through the blood of Jesus Christ. Forgive us of our sins. Again, we ask, and help us, Lord, in all that we do to honor your name. In Jesus' name I pray, and amen.
Representative Towns, you're one to be recognized again.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I neglected to inform the members that if you do have an opportunity to come by, have a story of your work with the Senate and the community up here, and you will be allowed to share that with the family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any further announcements? Members, just an FYI, the motion is going to be for session to start at 4 p.m. on Monday, 4 p.m. And so we will be moving session up earlier. Don't look at the calendar before you assume it's at 9 a.m. or 5 p.m. because we are changing the time to try to get through all the bills that are on the calendar and have appropriate enough time. So just be aware of that. With that, next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 91 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 4 p.m. on Monday, April 26, 2021.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 4 p.m. on Monday, April 26, 2021.